Collectivization was a policy, a Soviet policy in the late 1920s, which was launched in Ukraine in 1929. It was aimed at creating big farm collectives. Everything that was produced in the countryside was taken away by the state for state needs. So the peasants were starving. They were starving already as early as 1931. But what happened in Ukraine in 1932-33, known as the Holodomor, was special in a way that a number of policies were applied especially against Ukraine, which led to the famine within the famine, when the borders of the Republic were sealed, so the victims could not escape the famine. In Ukraine, it becomes political when the grain is used against the peasants who resisted collectivization. Resistance and the number of uprisings against collectivization in Ukraine was the largest compared to other regions in the Soviet Union. So we are talking about the famine in other parts of the Soviet Union, yet in Ukraine we see people resisting collectivization and grain procurement quotas imposed on them in 1932 more vocally and more vigorously, and hence it presented a threat. And we can see in correspondence between the leaders, Soviet leaders, mentioning the previous experience they had in dealing with Ukraine in 1919, when there was the Great Peasant Uprising. They are saying that our peasants are cultured. They have that experience of being independent. That's in a letter from Kosyor to Stalin. Kosyor was in charge of Ukrainian Communist Bolshevik Party at the time in Ukraine, and he's writing to Stalin, in charge of the Soviet Union, warning him about the peasants in Ukraine posing greater danger to the Soviet authorities. The victim's experience is heartbreaking. Mothers prioritizing one child over the other, or taking them to the orphanages because they would have better chances of survival than staying at home. And of course there were cases of cannibalism, as in any famine. How the famine was reported at the time is highly relevant for us today. Walter Duranty was a very successful journalist working for New York Times and reporting industrialization and other Soviet policies at the time from Moscow. He reported that indeed there were food shortages, but the Russians were not starving. That's what he said. And of course, he downplayed the situation and the gravity of the situation in Ukraine. Some believe that he was ideological participant and that justified the denial for the greater good, who believed that Soviet modernization project was beneficial in the long term. Others point out that he did benefit from his compliance monetarily. He was living a very comfortable life in Moscow with a Russian mistress, fathered a child, which allows other scholars point out that he was a compromised participant in this cover-up of the famine, because he would be blackmailed with his family being taken away and sent to the concentration camps. But his crucial role in covering up the famine is undeniable. Yet there were occasional voices that raised concern about the situation. Gareth Jones was a Welsh journalist, an alumnus of Cambridge University who studied Russian. And Gareth Jones was also personal secretary of Lloyd George when he was Prime Minister. When he went to Ukrainian countryside, he was aware of what to expect, but nothing prepared him for the horrors he saw in Ukrainian villages. He kept diaries where he described his experiences, where he described his understanding of what was happening on the ground, what were the reasons behind the famine, and what it would lead to. He also recorded the voices of Ukrainian peasants at the time. Tell them we're starving. Those were direct words that he recorded. He gave Ukrainian peasants voices. He gave unique vignette into the lived experience at the time, what people were experiencing on the ground. When we put Gareth Jones' reporting in wider geopolitical context, it raised a lot of questions. It was profitable to establish diplomatic and trade relations with the Soviet Union. So we can see national interests of other countries coming to the fore. And we can see that it was easier to remove sanctions rather than support a young, less successful journalist who is speaking the truth. The famine opened previously overlooked pages in Ukrainian history. It also brought attention to the lasting trauma experienced by Ukrainians and transgenerational trauma, and it is relevant to understanding Ukraine today and its relationship with its past and present.